the gap, standing for Jesus. Standing in the gap for family and friends. Standing in the gap, one love for all, so we all can make it in.
And we dedicate a portion of our broadcast to current events. And the reason for that is because God has placed us in this earth to minister in it, to live in it, to thrive in it, and to apply His word to what's happening now. Even though the Bible, some people say, oh, that was 2,000 years ago, or 3,000, 4,000, or 5,000 years ago. It's not relevant today. It is absolutely relevant today. And so in order to apply God's word in this time that we live in, we have to understand what's going on in this. And we want to bring you into understanding of current events and how the Bible relates to it and all that. And so we've dedicated this portion to that. Marvel has been putting together some really good, what we call gap news. And she's ready for you here today. And she never has a lack of things to talk about because of all that's happening in this world today. Marvel?
Well, you're right. There's never a lack of things to talk about. And what I love about this part of our broadcast is that it's talking about things that are going on today, but giving us as Christians an insight into it so that we are aware of what's going on and we can use our Christian minds and spiritual minds to understand. Today, I'm calling this one America the Prosperous.
Here's my take. An American in Europe these days might find himself in a strange situation, or at least that was my experience, having recently spent a week there traveling from Germany to Norway to Spain. In the United States, we talk about our economic problems. In Europe, the talk is all about how Europe has been unable to keep up with the American powerhouse. The facts are stark. In 2008, the United States and the Eurozone economies were roughly the same size. Today, the American economy is nearly twice the size of the Eurozone. And it's not just one measure. Average European income is now 27% lower than in the US, and average wages 37% lower. When the British left the European Union, they fantasized about forging a close relationship with the United States, almost becoming the 51st state. Were that to happen, it is surely sobering to Britons to realize that it would be the 51st poorest state in the Union with a per capita GDP below that of Mississippi. The American economy towers above Europe's these days. America's technology companies dominate the continent. American banks are far more profitable than European ones. American energy production has created a boom in manufacturing, which is luring many European companies to the US. As one German CEO said to me, America is an easier place to do business, has fewer regulations, and now has much lower energy costs. How do I rationally invest in Europe? Two of Europe's largest oil companies, Shell and Total Energies, have mused about fleeing Europe and floating their shares on the New York Stock Exchange. European leaders understand the problem and have proposed a series of solutions. Two former Italian prime ministers, Enrico Letta and Mario Draghi, have been tasked with producing reports with policy ideas to counter the slide. Letta's is out, and many people who have spoken to Draghi have a sense of his proposals as well. They center on the central issue. Europe is too divided. Technology is a good prism through which to understand the challenge. To create powerful digital companies these days, you need three factors: great engineering talent, easy access to capital, and a large market into which you can quickly deploy the new products, scale. America has all three, as does China. Europe has some of the world's most talented engineers. It has access to capital, but it does not have a single market, despite often being described as such. Tech entrepreneurs struggle to navigate 27 different markets with different regulations, authorities, standards, and requirements. This is why, as the letter report notes, Europe is home to 33 trillion euros of savings, but every year 300 billion euros of European money is diverted to overseas markets to find superior investments, most of them in the United States. These economic challenges are mirrored in the geopolitical arena. Europe remains a conglomeration of countries that pretend to have a unified defense and foreign policy. Defense spending is now rising, but remains too low, having gone down to a new normal since the end of the Cold War. Germany is the best example. In the 1980s, West Germany had over 500,000 soldiers in its army on high alert to take on a Soviet invasion through the Fulda Gap. Today, a unified Germany has fewer than 200,000 troops under arms, and readiness levels are not nearly as high. The British Navy that once ruled the waves is now smaller than it was in the 17th century. And while efforts are underway to boost spending, 2 of its warships were recently decommissioned because there simply weren't enough sailors to man them. European countries need to spend more, but they spend a considerable amount already. Alas, much of it is wasted because there is little coordination and no grand strategy that animates it. Many West European countries still spend money on territorial defense. Who is going to invade Belgium? When they should focus on the capacity to move troops and equipment to defend the eastern frontiers of Europe, which is where the threat comes from. Again, because European producers do not have continent-wide scale, much of Europe's defense spending goes to American companies. The solution to Europe's woes can be summarized in one line: a deeper, more united, more strategic Europe. But that solution means inevitably more power to the European Union, which feeds the populist backlash that was so evident in last week's elections. A European politician explained to me the continent's dilemma. "We know what to do," he said. "We just don't know how to win an election after we do it." Perhaps the best rejoinder would be to quote another European, Jean Monnet, one of the founders of the European Union. "Europe will be forged in crisis and will be the sum of the solutions adopted for those crises." Here's my take. Over the last 2 months, I've traveled around the United States and parts of Europe, often to talk about my new book, Age of Revolutions, which describes how we're living through a period of deep disruption in society, politics, economics, international affairs. I got the sense that people, even those well-off, even those educated, were unsettled by all these disruptions and quite fearful that they were leading us into darker times. Many of the questions at my book talks went something like, is there anything to be hopeful about these days? After Thursday night's depressing debate, people are feeling more despair than ever. So I want to explain to you why, despite all the dangers, I remain an optimist. In Europe, many are fearful that a Trump victory in November could lead them into a new and dangerous world. They believe that America could turn its back on Europe, unraveling the continent's security architecture. As one European statesman said to me, "We in the West have lived in a stable, peaceful, open world, and we take it for granted. But we now face all these challenges, external and internal, and it can all come apart." It can. The external challenges alone are immense. We are witnessing Russia, China, Iran, and now North Korea form an axis in opposition both to Western power and Western values. And yet, the return of great power competition is having an interesting effect. Western values and practices are often treated as ideals, to be criticized by all for their shortcomings and hypocrisies. But increasingly, they have to be judged against the alternatives. If you don't like a world dominated by Western power and ideas, would you prefer Russian or Chinese ones? In a new poll commissioned by Ipsos and King's College London to coincide with my delivering this year's Fulbright Distinguished Lecture at Oxford, the shifting global mood is evident. Surveying nearly 24,000 people in 31 countries, The study found that people were thinking more seriously and critically of the growing power and influence of the autocratic powers. They saw Russia, China, and Iran as three of the four countries mostly using their influence for bad. And this represented a souring of views on all three countries since the last time the survey was conducted in 2019. The number of people polled who see Russia as using its influence for bad has jumped by 22 percentage points, China by 10, and Iran by 5 points over the last 5 years. The other country on that list of four is Israel, a sad state of affairs which should come as a wake-up call to Israelis. This survey is broadly consistent with another global one done by Pew in 2023, when people in 24 countries were asked whether they viewed China or America more favorably. A median of 59% of those polled had a positive view of the US, compared with just 28% for China. The rise of China and the return of Russia have unsettled international affairs, but they have also reminded the world of the choice between two sets of values, Western liberal ones and autocratic illiberal ones. You can see the difference starkly in the two contests at play in Europe and Asia over Ukraine and Taiwan right now. In each case, the West is trying to allow people in Ukraine and Taiwan to choose freely as to how they want to live. Russia and China, by contrast, are acting to snuff out that freedom. That is a telling difference, and people around the world can see it. In the Ipsos KCL poll, people in most countries viewed America's influence on the world stage more favorably than they did in 2019, with one notable exception: in the United States itself. The loss of confidence among Americans in their country's own vitality, strength, and virtue is profoundly worrying. If you look at the facts, the US is more powerful on many measures than it has been for years and years. But that is not how many Americans feel. In my book talk, so many were troubled by the deep polarization and divisions within the country. Many wonder whether it is even possible to come out of this, to arrive at some compromise, some settlement that moves the country forward. Even here, I remain hopeful. We're going through whirlwinds of change. In America, these problems are constantly aired and highlighted. We wash our dirty laundry in full public view. The talk of our failings convulses our political system. We will have to work through these problems. But surely that is better than repressing them, coercing people to conform, and presenting a North Korea-style facade of unity to the world. And these surveys I mentioned suggest that people around the world can tell what is real and what is fake. When confronted with a choice, most prefer the West and its values, warts and all.
So, we've been having some really deep and troubling news in the GAT news over the last, I guess, maybe month or so. And I saw Fareed was focusing on telling the truth about the U.S. economy, about U.S. values. Some people are saying, this is a banana republic. Our economy is terrible. Our country is terrible. Everything is terrible. Fareed says, no, that is not the case. Our economy is better than any economy in the world. Our economy is leading the world. Somebody's talking about drill about oil. We are already leading the world in energy production. It was very enlightening and very encouraging to hear that everybody else in the world thinks America is great. Why don't we think so? Honey, what do you say about that?
Well, I think it's that culture of lies that goes on here in America, led by the biggest liar of all, and talking about how bad we are when all the facts show that we're doing very well. But there's a bunch of people that want to believe that type of thing, and so they do. And then you find those that know better start to question a little bit, and things start to go haywire. There's in our study, once we get down to a certain part, there's going to be a comment in the scripture. Like, I don't always stand on scripture.
Oh, yes.
As to what happens to all liars,
Mm-hmm.
all liars, and those who support the liars. No one, and obviously, and I'll tell you this: most of your liars know they're lying.
Oh, yes.
And
and sometimes they know they're lying.
exactly.
And they don't care.
Lie to your face.
They lie straight to your face.
Things are a lot better than people politics and all that try to say. And so I think that Fareed's statements and his story is so true, and we need to listen to it and keep understanding who is on the throne.
God is still in charge.
Still in charge.
God is still in charge. That's the truth. But so that's the good news, y'all. We're not a terrible country. Our economy is not terrible. I mean, we I guess maybe a year ago we had really terrible inflation around 9%. Our inflation rate is at 3%, which is pretty much average over the history of America, except for like during the Great Depression or during, when we had COVID, it was way down. But I mean, of course, our economy was terrible at that time because everything was shut down. But basically, our economy is good. Everybody else in the world sees that we are in the best country in the world. So we should see that also. Anything else, honey?
Yeah, I've been ruminating on a certain theme of what's going on in the world today, in the United States.
In the United States.
Because, a lot of people want to go back to the 50s, 40s, or whatever.
Or some to the 1800s.
When things are, they think we're better and when America was great and all that kind of thing. But see, what has happened since that time is there's been, I would say, justice marching forward, and how they treat blacks and women and the rights that people should have, just as being unalienable rights, as the founders would talk about, and all that. So what happened is that mindset that was there in the 50s and before was pushed underground, really pushed down. And so here we are over the period of time, we're dealing with more enlightened ideas, our better angels, you might want to say. And then here comes along a person and a political party that knows that undercurrent is still there, and so they tap into it. And like when he said, we're going to drill, let's drill down to that undercurrent and let's bring all that stuff back up to the top. And we know it's wrong. They actually know it's wrong. They just don't care. And so that's where we are today. And when I say better angels, you should know what I'm talking about. And we have to hang on to that. God's still in control.
Oh, yes.
And there's going to be a reckoning as we're teaching in our class here.
Well, that is a really, really good point. A lot of people say that the Barack Obama presidency just infuriated a certain group of people in America because they feel like it should be a white Christian nation, and how can a black man and his black wife and little black daughters live in our White House? And that was the thing that I'm gonna say that name, Trump. He drilled down into that and bubbled it all up, and so here we are, in a place where we're even talking about, black people should not get an even playing field. We should lock up all the immigrants and deport them, whether they're actually U.S. citizens or not. Women have no rights. So keep in mind, y'all, America is great. It's already great. We don't have to make it great. It's already great.
One last thing.
Okay.
I know you didn't bring it up in your Gap News, but it's something that's been going on, and it, it 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 strikes me deep because I'm a person that deals with loyalty, and when necessary, I'm not going to be loyal to somebody when they're wrong and all that. But the things been happening with the Biden and his political party that's showing to me a lack of loyalty to someone based on a one night that he had a bad night, and therefore I call it the Democrats eat their young, right? and and which isn't good.
No, that's not good. It's not good.
Especially considering the alternative. There needs to be some consolidation of, of support against what we don't want to happen, or it's going to happen. And so, once again, we nose on the throne. All right.
Nose on the throne. But you know what? Also, God does not go to the ballot box. We have to go to the ballot box.
And, like I always say, we're not telling you who to vote for. We're just telling you to use godly principles and to a large extent, common sense.
Yeah.
Common sense. And make your mind up.
Yeah.
All right.
But act. You have to act. You can't sit by and sit on your hands or wring your hands. You got to do it. You got to do it.
All righty. And where you want to be. So